Rimuru and Ultima goes to One Piece, Rimuru and Ultima x One Piece, by Veldanava-God. Chapter 48. The unleashed power. The throne room was in ruins, shattered by the previous clashes, but the fight showed no signs of stopping. Dust and debris filled the air, and the echoes of their battle reverberated across the Tempest capital. Luffy, battered and bruised, stood firm with a wild grin on his face. Blood trickled down his temple, but the fire in his eyes burned as fiercely as ever. Law adjusted his hat, his sword raised and glowing with haki, while Kylum, though bloodied, held his stance with unyielding determination. Rimuru and Ultima stood across from them, their combined auras suffocating, radiating a deadly mix of malice and anticipation. "Oi, Luffy," Law barked, his voice sharp. "You still have enough strength for that Gear 5 of yours?" Luffy stretched his arms, cracking his knuckles with an exaggerated motion. "Hey, I'm just getting started." His body began to glow as he reactivated Gear 5, his appearance shifting into his chaotic, cartoonish form once again. His hair turned white, his eyes glowed with unrestrained energy, and the air around him twisted and warped with his overwhelming presence. Ultima scoffed, stepping forward as the ground cracked beneath her. "You don't know when to quit, do you?" she sneered. Her voice carried a hint of amusement, but her patience was wearing thin. "This is getting boring. Maybe it's time we show you what real power looks like." Rimuru nodded beside her, his calm demeanor masking the deadly intent beneath. "Agreed. They've managed to hold their ground longer than I expected, but this ends now." Ultima grinned wickedly, her hands glowing with the destructive energy of the Gura Gura no Mi, while Rimuru's shadows surged to life, infused with the power of the Soru Soru no Mi. The room darkened as their combined powers created a vortex of destruction, their haki intertwining with their devil fruit abilities. A devastating attack. Luffy, Law, and Kylum braced themselves as the oppressive energy built up before them. The sheer force of the combined attack was suffocating, and even Kylum, with his unshakable resolve, felt a flicker of doubt. "Brace yourselves," Law shouted, expanding his room to its maximum size in an attempt to shield them. Rimuru raised his hand, commanding a massive shadow beast that loomed behind him, its eyes glowing with malice. Ultima, beside him, slammed her fists together, creating tremors that cracked the very fabric of the air. "Prepare yourselves," Rimuru said coldly. "This will be the end of you." "Let's show them why we rule this world," Ultima added, her grin widening as the tremor in her fists grew. With a synchronized motion, the two unleashed their attack. The shadow beast charged forward, its body infused with the destructive quakes of Ultima's power. The attack collided with the ground and exploded in a catastrophic wave of energy. The resulting blast was unlike anything Luffy, Law, or Kylum had ever seen. The throne room was obliterated in an instant, and the shockwave rippled outward, disintegrating a massive portion of the castle and extending into the city. Buildings crumbled, and a deafening roar filled the air as flames and destruction consumed everything in their path. The aftermath. When the dust settled, the scene was one of absolute devastation. A massive crater replaced the once grand throne room, and the city beyond it lay in ruins. Entire districts had been wiped out, and the air was thick with smoke and ash. The cries of those who survived echoed faintly, a haunting reminder of the lives lost in the destruction. Luffy, Law, and Kylum stood at the edge of the crater, their bodies battered and covered in dust. Their clothes were torn, and blood dripped from multiple wounds. But what shook them more than their injuries was the scale of the destruction. Luffy's usually carefree expression turned somber as he surveyed the ruins. What the hell is this?" he muttered, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "So many people, gone." Law clenched his fists, his teeth gritted in anger. "They didn't care," he said, his voice filled with fury. "They wiped out their own people just to take us out. This isn't power, it's madness." Kylum's golden eyes burned with fury as he turned his gaze back to Rimuru and Ultima, who stood at the center of the devastation, seemingly unfazed by the destruction they had caused. "You're monsters," Kylum said, his voice cold and filled with venom. "How can you call yourselves rulers when you destroy your own kingdom?" Rimuru met his gaze, his expression unreadable. "Sacrifices are necessary for victory," he said calmly. "You should understand that by now." Ultima smirked, wiping a speck of blood from her cheek. "What's the matter? You were ready to fight us, weren't you? Did you think this would be clean and easy?" Luffy's fists clenched, his entire body trembling with anger. "You're gonna pay for this," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm gonna beat you down for every single life you just took." The fight resume's Luffy lunged forward, his body twisting and bending in his Gear 5 form as he unleashed a flurry of attacks. Gomu Gomu no Hydra. His fists shot out in rapid succession, each one crackling with advanced armament haki. Ultima countered with a barrage of tremor-infused punches, each impact creating massive shockwaves. The ground beneath them shattered as their attacks collided, neither giving an inch. Meanwhile, Law and Kylum focused their efforts on Rimuru. Law's room surrounded them, allowing him to teleport and strike from unexpected angles. "Injection shot!" he shouted, his blade piercing through Rimuru's shadows. Rimuru retaliated, his shadows lashing out like whips. "You're persistent," he said, deflecting Law's attacks with ease. "But persistence alone won't save you." Kylum joined the fray, his sword glowing with Conqueror's haki as he struck at Rimuru. "We're not just persistent," he said, his voice steady. "We're determined, and we won't stop until you're defeated." The three clashed in a blur of movement, their attacks creating shockwaves that rippled across the battlefield. Despite their injuries, Luffy, Law, and Kylum fought with unwavering resolve, refusing to back down. A surprising turn as the battle raged on, Law and Kylum found an opening. Law teleported behind Rimuru, his blade glowing with energy. "Gamma knife!" he shouted, driving the attack into Rimuru's side. At the same moment, Kylum unleashed a powerful strike with his sword, the blade imbued with both armament and Conqueror's haki. The combined attack struck Rimuru head-on, sending him crashing into the rubble. For a moment, there was silence. Rimuru lay motionless, blood pooling beneath him. Ultima's eyes widened in shock as she turned to her fallen king. "Rimuru!" she shouted, her voice filled with disbelief. Luffy, Law, and Kylum stood side by side, their breaths heavy but their expressions triumphant. "Looks like we got him," Law said, though his tone was cautious. But before they could celebrate, a voice echoed in Rimuru's mind, a calm, feminine voice filled with authority. "Rimuru, I've unlocked your full potential. It's time to show them what true power looks like." Rimuru's eyes snapped open, glowing with an otherworldly light. The air around him shifted, and an overwhelming pressure filled the battlefield. The battle was far from over.